Chapter 27. Terrace, Houses of Parliament, Tuesday the 5th of June, 2463. Opportunities multiply as they are seized. Sun Tzu. "This has been one of the strangest weeks of my life," said Lal. He leaned over the table, bottle in hand, and added, "Here, let me pour you some more." Maria placed her fingers over a glass. He looked disappointed. "No. South Downs, 53. A good year." He popped another olive into his mouth. She cupped her hands to her mouth and whispered, "You don't have to ply me with your best wine to get me into your bed." She scrunched up her nose and gave him a covert wink. "This lamb will be led willingly to the slaughter." He felt himself flush. Her moist eyes glinted in the candlelight. He topped up his crystal glass and raised it to her, flicking it so that it rang. "To Maria." She raised hers. "To the extraordinary Dr. Lal, whom it has been my good fortune to meet." Their glasses touched. "Allow me to correct myself." He took a sip. "This has been, without doubt, the strangest week of my life, one I shall never forget." "For me too," she purred, "and the best is yet to come." He couldn't hold her gaze, but dipped his bread into the remnants of the spiced olive oil. "One of my childhood wishes was always to come and see London, and now here I am, sitting beside the Thames at dinner with the handsome director of the London project." Her hand slid across the table and found his. "I've been meaning to ask, just who was that strange man after we crossed the bridge?" A slight frown crossed Lal's face. "Holy Joe! Like I said, no one knows who he is. He's been sitting outside Buckingham Palace ever since I've been here, night and day, rain or shine. In 12 years, no one has ever seen him walk or talk. And then he jumps out of the woods and frightens us all. The corporal told me later that if he'd have come but one step closer, he would have shot him. The whole affair's quite bizarre." "No more bizarre than that someone should sit for all those years outside some tumble-down old palace. Why do you think he was warning you?" "No idea. But he was 24 hours too late," he replied, his eyes crinkling into a wry smile. Better if he'd warned me yesterday. That's when I very nearly got killed." There followed a silence as he stared at the candle, while 2 moths fluttered around it. He was collecting his thoughts to ask her his questions about Sanjay Dutt, Marshall Lee, and Larry Brubaker. But she seemed to read his hesitation. "Lal, I must tell you something about myself." He looked up at her, his eyebrows knitting together. "You may have suspected that I, a reporter, dropping in out of the blue, was something of a cover?" His eyes widened. She nodded and placed her elbows on the table, resting her chin on her hands. "That's right. I have to deliver a report on London, of course, but the real reason for my being here is to ensure the return of the case and all the other things you recovered." Lal's mind was swirling. "Did you seduce me up there?" He pointed to the Parapluie Centre, whose faint outlines gleamed in the moonlight. "To ensure your damn foundation gets its case back?" Her reply, by contrast, was measured. "No, Lal, I didn't." She blushed and looked down at the table. "That was my own choice. I'm sorry if you feel you were misled. That really wasn't my intention. But when the Foundation got your telegram that the case had been found, we also got information that indicated criminals were after it." She looked back into his eyes. "And this has proved to be correct. If we had just blundered in, we might have stirred up a hornet's nest, which is why they sent me. So you see, perhaps Holy Joe's warning may have been rather more apt than you think. These criminals are ruthless. They'll stop at nothing until they know it's beyond their grasp." Lal's heart sank. He thought of Feung, missing since Friday night, now 4 days ago. If he had been mixed up in any of this, then he was as good as done for. The Foundation wants you to hand all these items over to me for safekeeping. There'll be no problem returning them to you when they've got their programs back. He was silent for some time, weighing up what she had said. Yes, he'd been deceived, but what she'd said also made sense. Yet in his guts, he knew that if he handed everything over, then he'd never see these things again. Nevertheless, he had to take her warning seriously. When he had raised the question of who might have been betraying him, she had said she didn't know. At the same time, he knew he couldn't afford to upset the Foundation. It was now clear that this was the real reason why they had supported him against Chang. He had to play for time until he had a chance to uncover the secrets he knew the data spheres contained. She read his hesitation and smiled sweetly. "What are you thinking about?" He pondered. "Maria, I'm not going to beat about the bush. The data spheres are safe, but before I hand them to the Foundation, I want first to have the chance to examine them. It may only take a couple of days, and after all, I did find them. I have to know what disagreement was between Larry Brubaker, Sanjay, and Marshall Lee, and what, if anything, they had to do with the destruction of London." He saw her smile freeze. "I'd like you to be also involved." "But don't you realize you're in real danger if you stay here? You can see that, can't you?" "Of course I can. Tomorrow I'll arrange for a company of guards to be placed around here. 250 of them for 5 or 6 days. You'll be safe, the data spheres will be safe, and I'll be safe." She clenched her jaw, and for a moment he saw fury burn in her eyes. But she calmly placed both hands flat down on the table. "You'll get me into trouble." She dropped her gaze. "What do I tell the Foundation? They want an answer as soon as possible." "Tell them the truth. Tomorrow you can telegram them and say that the data spheres have been recovered, that they're safe, and that you'll be returning with them after Lal Jain has had a chance to view them as part of his research." He saw her look of dismay. "Come on, Maria. They might hold the memories of 21st century leaders. I can't pass that up. Was London deliberately targeted to prevent some information leaking out? I have to know. You understand, don't you?" She sighed. "I'll have to inform the chairman. He'll be disappointed." "The chairman of the Foundation?" Lal's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. "You actually know him?" She shrugged nonchalantly. "Yes, very well." He let his breath out with a low whistle. My, you are indeed a woman full of surprises. And may I ask who is the chairman?" Now, she tapped the side of her nose teasingly. "You may not. It's a secret. And people who tell tales like that don't stay long in the Foundation." He had expected as much, but it was worth a try. "Who knows," she said. "Maybe one day I'll get a chance to introduce you. I'll try and set up a visit to London with its leaders. Perhaps," she paused, "they might invite you into their fraternity." "Invite me? Good heavens!" He feigned surprise. "Why not? You're an eminent intellectual. You've dedicated your life to saving London for posterity. I'd think you were well qualified." He leaned back and lit a cheroot. "That's quite a proposal." "It is. And you could help yourself by obliging the chairman and promptly returning to him his own property." "Maria," he said, perhaps more firmly than he had intended, "give me a few days. That's all I ask, a few days. Like I told you, they're safe, very safe. Tomorrow we'll go and get them with a troop of guards for protection. These criminals you talk about would stand no chance at all." She did not protest, but instead bit her bottom lip. "And what then? We bring them back here. We'll see if these data spheres confirm the accusations Larry Brubaker was making about Sanjay Dutt and Marshall Lee. And after we've had a chance to examine them, you can take them back to the Foundation with any software that belongs to them." He saw a worried look cross her face. "Maria, there really is no chance of anyone stealing this case and its contents. No chance. I'll have this place so tightly sealed that even a mouse couldn't get in without a password." She nodded, apparently satisfied. "So, how many guards are on watch right now?" "Half a dozen. Don't fret. That'll change tomorrow." She smiled. "Looks like you've thought of everything, Lal. It's been a most pleasant dinner." She gathered her things and got up to leave. "Excuse me now?" She raised her eyebrows and gave a flirtatious glance. "I'll need 20, maybe 30 minutes. Okay?" He watched her walk down the terrace. She was not a classic beauty, but her combination of brains and character made her attractive. He knew himself well enough to realize that he was not in love, yet he respected her and felt that he was starting out on a relationship which would cement into a friendship. He sat smoking, remembering all that had happened this day. Was he in danger? Perhaps. Did she really know the chairman as well as she had described? Perhaps. She had hinted at a personal introduction to him, an invitation to London. Well, we'll see. He let the pungent smoke roll around his mouth while he weaved conversations in his head. Of course, he'd love to host them, show them around. He'd take them to the Parapluie Centre. They'd see his plans. Perhaps they might underwrite the project, expand it. And of course, they would support his dream of a university college right here in the Palace of Westminster. He let his head roll back so that he was staring at the stars and constellations. A bat fluttered in and out of his vision, attracted by the insects drawn to the lanterns which hung alongside the terrace. He inhaled the smoke deeply. The only blemish was that she had said that he was being betrayed. By whom? Why? He banished the notion from his mind. Ugliness would not be allowed to intrude on this night. He shut his eyes, imagining her getting herself ready for him. She would be gliding around her chamber, hanging up her clothes, preparing herself. "Doctor?" A voice brought him back to the present. It was his butler, who had been loitering at a discreet distance. "Yes, Tom. Is there anything else I can bring for you? Or can I tell Chef that he can go?" Tom was a dwarf, and had been in Lal's service for 7 years. His wife, too, was also a dwarf. "No, tell him he can go. I expect the others have already had supper." "Mrs. Gupta, Robert, Miguel and James ate earlier. Miss Beatrice went off to Windsor and hasn't yet returned." Lal frowned and glanced at his watch. Nearly 11. Windsor? Why Windsor? The last train should have arrived between 9 and 10. It was late, and the few eating places and hostelries which catered for students and workers would have closed. Generally, Bea didn't socialize much. Did she say where she went? "No," he replied. "She didn't." Lal got up, dropping his napkin on the table, and grunted. "Give my thanks to Chef. Night, Tom." "Good night, Doctor."